Just on a casual Wednesday, go have lunch in front of James Bond's villa in Lake Como, which I think Jane Slater did yesterday, right? Was that yesterday, Jane? Thanks for checking in from across the world. Appreciate it.
Is this the part of the show where we go, who's more bougie, you or me, Ben?
Yes, a bougie off. Go.
Bougie off?
Bougie off.
Go.
I see your James Bond villa, and I raise you. Yeah, what do you got, Jane? Where in the world are you, Jane?
I am in Dallas with my dogs where it's about 105 degrees. I cannot wait to get out to Oxnard and training camp because when I was in LA for our big reporter summit, which was so cool, by the way, I think some of you that follow me, TJ and Ben probably saw this. Tori Spelling and Kelly Garth ended up showing up for our summit. That was awesome. 90210. But yeah, just getting ready for camp. I love hearing TJ. It's like the collective voice of the Cowboys. Everybody gets excited. There's new hope because even though they went in that 12-5 run last year, it just felt like that playoff game against the 49ers where they ran the quarterback draw with, 13 seconds to go. They don't hand the ball to the ref. There were just so many questions about this team and how, once again, it just felt like the wheels came off the bus. So I know there's a huge fan base of fans just like you, TJ, just very excited for camp and any Cowboys news that comes out of it.
NFL Network reporter and friend of the show, Jane Slater, checking in. And later on in the show today, Jane, we're going to have our list of top 10 wide receivers in the NFL. We've got 3 lists, one from me, one from TJ, one from Brockman. How many of those lists do you think are going to feature CeeDee Lamb?
It's hard. I don't know what to make of CeeDee Lamb because was CeeDee Lamb effective because of Amari Cooper and then we had some of the drops last year, or is he going to step up and really embrace that role? I think the biggest push that I kept hearing, whispers around the building was the frustration that they wouldn't get the ball to the playmaker. In other words, who is your playmaker? And it was Amari Cooper. If you'll remember when Cooper Rush was the starting quarterback in Minnesota, he was the playmaker. You put the ball in Amari's hands and you win the game, a game that they weren't expected to necessarily win on the road. And so I think that's going to honestly be the biggest question mark heading into training camp besides who's going to be the kicker, is can CeeDee Lamb really step into that role? And by the way, they've got Jalen Tolbert, James Washington, and you're not going to have Michael Gallup the first couple of weeks. And then Noah Brown is always a really strong candidate that really steps out in camp, and then you see sort of flash them during the season. So maybe we see an increased role for him. But I have a hard time answering your question there, Ben, because I don't quite know what to expect from CeeDee as he steps into that role. I know that he does all the things the right way. He's been getting in a lot of reps. I have a ton of respect for him just as a person and as a human. But in terms of, is he going to emerge as that guy in Dallas? There's a lot of pressure when you wear the 88. We'll see. I think there's a lot of question marks on this team, specifically offensively.
He's definitely one of my favorite young players in the league, so I'm keeping my eyes on CeeDee Lamb this year. And another question mark in Dallas is around Ezekiel Elliott. TJ, of course, had him on his top 10 running backs list yesterday. Whether it's health concerns, off the field stuff, whatever it is, there's always question marks around Zeke. What are you expecting from him this season? And talk to me about the state of Ezekiel Elliott.
Well, I saw him, it was OTAs or minicamp, it was OTAs, and I pulled him off the side as he was walking out of the locker room, and I asked him, I said, how hurt were you last year? And he told me he had a PCL on his right side, and it happened after Carolina. I said, how did it affect your game? And he said it really impacted his ability to separate, in other words, to really sort of get the ground and the burst that he needed. And so I get the sense that he's healthy. These off-the-field issues haven't been a problem in Dallas really in the last 3 years. And it was Dak who even said, and of course they're best friends, so you expect this, but he said when healthy, he thinks Zeke is the best running back in the league. It's just hard when you've got guys like Dalvin Cook and whatnot, who in the last couple of years have really emerged as strong running backs, what to expect from Zeke. I think sometimes, too, when you get the contract with the extra zeros and you saw him do the holdout and, shout out to his agent, Rocky Arsenault, that may be the biggest running back contract we ever see again, just because we've seen how it's played out with some of these guys. But I think because of that contract, there's been just increased scrutiny on him. And it doesn't help that you have a younger guy like Tony Pollard, who a lot of people think should be getting more reps. And I would also submit that with that offensive line, Zeke's first couple of years when you had Travis Frederick at center and you had a healthy Tyron Smith and Zach Martin, all those guys, that's why Zeke was able to be as successful as he was. And you've really seen a deterioration of that offensive line. And by the way, you're going to have a rookie on that line this year. Tyron Smith, you hope that he stays healthy. We've definitely seen, some of the injuries pop up in recent years. And so, it's not just one thing, right? And so I think there's a couple of things that are going to play in here. But, I've seen him doing more working out in the last 2 off seasons than we've seen him do before. But I think he's better when Dak's healthier, and he's better when you've got a strong offensive line. I think that really does apply to any running back, though.
NFL Network reporter Jane Slater joining the show. Ben Lyons in for Rich on the Rich Eisen Show. Jane, it's that time of the year. It's that time of the year when Dak goes shopping. Is he going Balenciaga this year for the linemen? What kind? Are we working Merces? Like, what are we doing for Dak's shopping? Is he buying gifts for the team? What can you tell me about Dak?
You're a label guy. The last time I was on your show, you talked about some bag that Zeke got Dak.
The Goyard bag?
I don't know. I live
Goyard. Yeah.
I'm about fashion brands in the year 2026. I'm already in the future, Jane. It's like Kanye West over here.
Well,
I am wearing a shacket.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with this. A bunch of football players wear this spray ground. And I love it. And so shout out to Spray Ground. But it's these unique looking bags and luggage that look like $1,400 Louis Vuitton bags. I think I paid $300 for one suitcase, and then I've got a duffel bag like $120. But everyone thinks I'm the bougiest chick in the airport because it's all matching. But honestly, it's really cheap stuff. And every time people ask me about it, I'm like, oh yeah, I go to Spray Ground. So Spray Ground, hit me up. I need some new stuff. But I'm not a big label chick. I've never owned a pair of Christian Louboutins or any of that.
Well, Dak is. I remember that last year was such a thing of him buying stuff for the team or whatever. But talk to me about Dak and his health right now. That was also a big issue last summer. I remember with the Hard Knock stuff. So what do you expect from Dak this season?
That was a crazy thing coming into training camp is we were all shocked at how healthy that, the ankle had healed. And then he gets that, the injury in his non-throwing shoulder. And we're like, what is that? Or in his throwing shoulder. And it was a pitching, something that pitchers deal with. And we find out they're consulting with the Rangers, and I think it was the Yankees. And that was just a curious one where we didn't see him much of camp. But when you talk to him, at minicamp, OTAs, he just had a camp here in Dallas, he'll tell you this is the healthiest he's been. And, of course, I get that we get into these famous, it's the camp storyline, best shape ever, healthiest he's ever been, has had an awesome off-season working out with his personal trainer. I get that. But I think more importantly, it's his mental mindset. Keep in mind, too, not only did he deal with that ankle injury, he lost his brother to suicide. I think there was a lot of question marks around that big contract. And then, of course, you also had this new coaching staff. And in the first year, it was a disaster, right? And so I just think as a group, I was saying to somebody the other day, it felt more normal around there. And I felt like even Mike McCarthy, even though it's sort of a pressure cooker situation for him, all that coaching staff is in their final year, he even felt a little lighter. I just think those guys, specifically Mike and that staff, they do better with the guys in front of them in the practice room. They're like some of our parents. They're not good with technology, and you saw that on the football field. It was a disaster the first season. And so I just feel like everyone's kind of hit their groove. In fact, I saw Kenny and Mike at the Kenny Chesney concert backstage, and they were, all besties. And so the stuff that they're not going to basketball games in Duke like Jason and Jason and Dak, but at least we're seeing that relationship building that I hadn't really gotten to see. And maybe it was there, but with COVID, we just didn't get to. It feels more normal. It feels like these guys, their mindsets are in a better place than they were heading into even last season.
Jane Slater from the NFL Network joining the show. And it feels normal to have you on the show this time of year, Jane, because you've been covering the Cowboys and working with the NFL for a long time now. As you head into a new season, what can audiences expect from your performance this year? What are you focusing on with your game?
How to just formulate words out of my mouth. Talking on TV live should be easy, but sometimes it's not. Every year I just try not to have some gaffe on air like I had that ended up on, was it Jimmy Kimmel and all the shows? There's a certain injury that I will not say on air ever again. because it doesn't come out right. So yeah, that's what we've learned. We're just trying to improve and grow, guys. Improve and grow in year 7 at the NFL Network.
Well, what I love too, in addition to covering the Cowboys, is that you've got your finger on the pulse of everything happening in football down in Texas. I see you covering high school stuff now and really kind of expanding your reach. Talk to me a little bit about this idea that another NFL team might come to Dallas or come to the Dallas area, and what that might do to the Dallas Cowboy fan base down there.
That is the most hilarious news item that I've ever seen come out of Dallas. Keep in mind, Jerry wouldn't even allow for a team to go to San Antonio. Remember when the Saints were kicking that around? That didn't happen. And then there was a big, scuffle a couple years ago, or 10 years ago now. It seems like the years are flying by as we get older, Ben. When Jerry wanted to put the stadium in Fair Park, which is, of course, where they have the Cotton Bowl and we do Texas OU weekend, et cetera. And Laura Miller, the mayor at the time, wasn't having it. And so do you really think that there would be another NFL team that could come to Dallas and set up there at Fair Park? There's just no way. I find it laughable. So that's just one of those stories. For me, it's like some of the free agents that attach their name to the Cowboys every offseason. I'm like, I hate to wet blanket this for you guys, but that isn't going to happen, and neither is two teams in Dallas ever. I never, ever, ever see it.
Jane Slater joining the show, friend of the show, of course, from the NFL Network. Jane, how has your job, whether it's advancements in technology or just the appetite for news, changed since you got your first gig covering football?
It's funny. I love football. I really do. But I think me, Ben. I'm obsessed with news. I mean, I live and breathe it. Sometimes I can't turn it off, even though I should. I have such an appetite for news and information and just natural curiosity. That's why I always tell journalists or young guys and girls in college that want to get into this, I said the best way to get into this is just naturally be curious and be a little nosy, and that's certainly who I am. And so that doesn't just apply to football. I mean, that applies to the war in Ukraine. I think you and I were talking about the war in Ukraine at Super Bowl. I was like, Ben, keep an eye on this. This thing's going to turn into something. And so, I'm just fascinated with all news and information. I just think the one thing that I struggle to get behind, and this will probably hurt me down the road as I try to get other gigs, is fantasy football. I have just been so bullish on this. I just refuse to participate. It just feels like so much extra work to constantly be picking my players. And not only that, but diluting the fandom, for a particular team that you had growing up. I can't tell you how many people have tried to bribe me into joining their fantasy football teams, but I just won't do it. So
Jane,
shout out to the people who find the time in their days to do it.
Jane, if you were doing fantasy football, you wouldn't have time to learn how to drop the rope on the wakeboarding.
I mean, when I wouldn't be able to work on my golfing skills, play with my 2 dogs, cook, whatever. Like
DIY, you're like building a new patio. You're just replanting things. Becoming a tennis pro.
I'm like an onion, Ben. There's lots of layers here. It's not just football and that's it. No, but I mean, I find I've got so many other things I like to do, but I love my job, but it's nice to sometimes decompress. I mean, I would argue that like coaches, they want to decompress when the season's over. Not everyone is old Les Snead who goes on vacation is constantly watching film. Some of us do need a break.
Well, enjoy the rest of your time off. We look forward to your coverage all season. I appreciate you making some time to be a part of this show. I appreciate you showing me around Super Bowl. I mean, I was a deer in headlights, and you made me feel comfortable, so I really appreciate you.
Real quick, it's so surreal, and I'm going to blow up his head real quick, TJ, so let me have this moment. Growing up, I wanted to be on MTV so bad, and E. Like, I was obsessed, and so I always thought Ben was the coolest guy. I was like, here's a guy my age who's got my dream job. Like, how did he do that? And the fact you and I became friends is just honestly the most surreal thing ever sometimes. Like, you always give me the best advice, the best information. So I feel lucky to call you a buddy, and thanks for having me on your show. I love that Rich lets you do this.
Thanks, Jane. I appreciate the kind words. Glad to see the check cleared. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Jane Slater from the NFL Network joining us on the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line.